when you smoke DMT in the 21st century, you're interacting with some kind of intelligences. And I think if we were able to see from kind of this bird's eye view, if you like, we would see actually that we're all describing the same thing, which is this age-old experience that goes back tens of millennia of humans interacting with other.
Hey everybody, really excited to welcome you here today to the Liminal News YouTube channel and podcast. Please, by the way, like and subscribe to this channel. Today I'm here with two extraordinary cutting-edge thinkers, scholars, researchers, and yeah, I think this could be the beginning of not only beautiful friendship, but maybe we could break some new ground here. So it's really exciting. And the two people I'm here with are Jeffrey Kripal, academic, author of many amazing books, including Secret Body and Authors of the Impossible, and Andrew Gallimore, who's a DMT investigator and researcher based in Japan. Is that right?
That's correct.
His books, the two books that I know of are Alien Information Theory and Death by Astonishment. And Andrew's also been working with, we have a mutual friend, Anton Bilton, who kind of launched this deep research into extended state DMT with the Imperial College in London. And yeah, he's got fascinating theories around what the sort of DMT exploration means for the future of humanity. So maybe before we start, that was a pretty summary or cursory introduction. Why don't you guys take a few minutes to introduce yourselves? You want to start, Jeffrey?
Sure. Um, so I'm a historian of religions by training, and so my goal, my ostensible goal, is to understand people's religious experience across space and time, around the whole globe. And I've been involved with the psychedelic community for, I don't know, probably 2 decades now. I wrote a history of the Esalen Institute back in '07, and that really put me in close touch with a lot of the actors and a lot of the movers and shakers in that community, including Anton Bilton, Andrew. I think maybe I don't know what year I was there, but definitely a lot of the things you write about in Death by Astonishment made me smile. I know exactly what you're talking about. So we can talk about that. I think we should talk about that and the whole psychedelic hypothesis and the role of DMT in that, and kind of where we're at the moment, really, with that thinking is really what I'm most interested in. Um, so yeah, let me
And what's
stop there. Go
let's just
ahead.
well, yeah. Well, what's kind of like you have a thesis in a way, like you talk about the superhumanities, for instance. Just a
Yeah.
little bit more about what kind of like maybe some of your core ideas or kind of what thesis that you have around this area and
I
evolved.
have I have a lot of theses. I have I have a lot of ideas. Y you know, Daniel, I we've talked a bit about this. I see my role certainly in the academy as essentially poking the bear, as it were, and by the superhumanities, I mean the history of philosophical and humanistic thought and enterprise, but very much around altered states and very much around the psychedelic component is definitely a big part of that history, but it extends into the near-death experience and the out-of-body experience and the precognitive dream, and I mean there's a whole history there that I'm really interested in. And I come at this not just as an academic. I don't come at this neutrally or objectively. I'm deeply interested in this. I think the stories we're in at the moment, frankly, are problematic, deeply problematic on a lot of levels. And I think we need a different story, a different set of stories. And so I'm very interested in helping us come up with whatever those stories are.
And it seems that some of what I mean, I'm looking at the end of The Secret Body where you talk about, I guess, sort of like a new kind of integration of the romantic and the Enlightenment vision. And I'm looking at, the new sacred consciousness as such is the new sacred.
Yeah.
So I thought that to me very much relates to Andrew's work and ideas.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, one of the things I really grokked or connected to your work is, I really do operate with a kind of filter thesis of mind or consciousness, that the brain is not producing consciousness full stop, that it's somehow mediating or translating it. And I think that does help us understand a lot of anomalous experiences. And certainly what I mean by the impossible is it's these things are impossible in our present framework and our present model. They're obviously not impossible. People have these experiences all the time. And so I'm trying to bring in experiencers and human beings and sort of make sense of this material more from a humanistic or a historical perspective than a scientific one. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a neuroscientist. But I think historians and philosophers have a great deal to learn.
Yeah, Andrew, I'll just before I launch, hand it over to you. But I think, yeah, this is so relevant to your work, and I think there's so much here to explore. In the end of The Secret Body, Jeffrey talks about writing a history of consciousness as such, which would be a new history of religions. Uh,
Mhm.
and yeah, I mean, I thought this was really beautiful. History would cease to be the flat, arrow-like, completely material process that it is presently assumed to be. It would become an immeasurably complicated, still incredibly violent, still often oppressive, almost entirely invisible, mostly unconscious, probably hyperdimensional super reality that is being influenced and shaped constantly for better and for worse by countless forms of consciousness and life forms. Toward what, if any, ends, we can only guess. Um, and I like this part. You let us entertain the ancient Gnostic metaphor of the human. And so human history as a vast upside down tree of associations and correspondences growing down into time in the material world from where we do not know. Here, at least, religious experiences might be imagined to be related not only in straight, causal, reductive, or historical ways, but also in hyperdimensional, associative, symbolic, and metaphorical ways. So many branches of the same cognitive tree, so many sticky strands of the same neuroweb. Um, such phenomena might be organized more like information and internet search or like correspondences in a magical worldview. Hence, the allegedly wild comparisons of the older scholarship, which indeed often looks like an internet search or a magical act, turns out they may well have been onto something important. Turns out that not only is there still magic in comparison, but that comparison may well be magic. Anyway, I hope that has some resonance for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I started in a way, in a sense, in the kind of the opposite end of the spectrum to Jeffrey, right? I mean, I was a neuroscientist, a chemist, a pharmacologist, and but over the last 20 years, the more that I've worked with, studying psychedelics and particularly DMT, I actually find myself now, one of the chapters of my latest book, Death by Astonishment, is called Collision with the Impossible. And I think
Yeah.
you're forced into a direct confrontation with the impossible with DMT, and
Yeah.
you're forced to confront the fact that all of your models are wrong, or that all of your models, sort of the standard neuroscientific paradigm, is failing you to an extent and is leaving the vast majority of what people experience completely unaccounted for.
Yeah.
Benny Shannon, in his book, The Antipodes of the Mind, studying the ayahuasca experience, he's not a neuroscientist, but he found himself in the same
Yeah.
position. He was coming at it from an anthropological position, biological anthropologist's kind of position, and he had to kind of throw his hands up in the and at the end and say, he appealed to Jung, he appealed to all of the other mainstream kind of explanations for what people were experiencing under the influence of ayahuasca. And he came to the conclusion in the end that the vast majority of what these people were reporting, what people were experiencing, what people were confronting, was simply unaccounted for and could not be accounted for. And so that's the big problem, really, is what do we do with that now? Um,
Let's take a little bit, take us back through your own, just as Jeffrey did, a little bit about your background, how you got to where you
hmm.
are now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I started studying chemistry. I was fascinated by psychoactive molecules and the way that you can put a molecule into your brain and that it would manipulate your neurochemistry and cause dramatic changes to the structure and dynamics of the world that you experience, yourself, your relationship to the world. To me, that was incredible. And so I began to study it in a very materialistic kind of way, the mechanistic kind of way, that we could understand everything about how these drugs worked by looking at how they interacted with receptors in the brain and how that changed the behavior of neurons and how this affect neural networks. And to an extent, this works. There's a lot we can learn from that. Certainly, it's not a dead end to perform neuroimaging or basic chemical pharmacology. We've learned an awful lot from that, and I draw upon all of that work. But as I moved into the neurosciences later on in my career, I started to get a deeper appreciation of the real problems in understanding not just psychedelics generally, but specifically the kinds of experiences that DMT will grant you reliably. I mean, if you take a lung full of pure DMT freebase vapor, and you are hurtled into a direct confrontation with not just things that are strange, but things that are impossible, in my opinion, and are not easy to explain.
Just to stay with your personal biography, I'm kind of curious, what was your first experience of that, death by astonishment? I mean, and how did it change you? When was that, and what happened?
So that was over 20 years ago now. So this was actually at the beginning of my PhD. So I was already at that point kind of a credentialed chemical pharmacologist, we could say, and I'd been fascinated by DMT in particular for many years, and I'd read all of Terence McKenna's work and listened to all the lectures, and as far as I was concerned, I was ready for this experience, but I wasn't, and it was perfectly obvious to me within
No,
really
nobody can be ready. Nobody can be ready for that experience, is when you get right down to it.
nobody can be ready for it, but I wasn't ready to not be ready.
Thought there was
Put
going
it
to be,
that way.
you thought your scientific mind was going to be able to sort of encompass it in some way or other, even if it was an extreme experience.
Right. I mean, I'd read stories that of people seeing being. I always thought it was going to be like you just popped into another world and there's little beings dancing around, and it's like going to a like virtual reality or something, right? Like going to a
Yeah.
very immersive movie theater or something like this. I didn't realize the impact of being what would to me was the undeniable presence of some entirely alien, extremely profound intelligence. I mean, that was obvious to me from within just a few seconds. I knew, and it horrified me because I was in this world that was quite clearly constructed. It was a constructed world. Graham Hancock, in Supernatural, one of his best books, in my opinion, he describes his first experience, and he's described it as highly constructed, inorganic, and in essence technological. And this was before I'd read Graham's book, and that captured it when I read that passage from the book. That's exactly what it was for me. It was quite clearly the motif, the ambience of this space was clearly a constructed. I can't explain how I knew that, but I knew that it was undeniable to me that I'd found myself in a world that was constructed by the hand of some immense and apparently timeless, quite completely alien intelligence that was completely non-human, that had no relationship to humanity either now or at any time in our past, as far as I could see or imagine. And yeah,
So,
it shook me to my bones.
well, it's interesting, the sense of having a no reality. So not something that you had. I mean, this is what McKenna said, right? He said DMT, the DMT is not something that you seem to encounter in like the myths or the revelations of the past, or it seems somehow like a orthogonal, yeah, as you said, alien otherness in a way.
Yeah, exactly. He also said that a secret is not something untold, but something that cannot be told. and DMT has that kind of quality, and that you can't bring it out. I mean, some very talented artists have done a fairly good job at kind of getting the ambiance of the place.
What do you think is the closest artistic expression? Where do you feel they caught something of it?
I think artists like in Sedegris, actually the two artists that I can actually show for the screen. So this is Harry Pack. He does some wonderful kind of work. This isn't kind of that representative, but in Sedegris as well, does some wonderful. He did the inner boards.
Yeah,
Um,
those in a way are reminiscent of like Maya and patterning and so on, which maybe has a similar source in a way. You know.
yeah, I mean, I think the problem, it's possible to kind of render some kind of lower dimensional projection of the space in visual form that captures the kind of ambience, but you can't get it unless it's a it's something that needs to be approached and confronted directly, subjectively. You have to go there to experience it, which is why it's so difficult to explain to people who've never experienced it, why I've spent the last couple of decades of my life trying to get to the bottom of this, because they can't understand how an experience could be that strange, that inexplicable, because they can't imagine it. It's not their fault. It's a world that cannot be anticipated and it cannot be imagined. It transcends the imagination, and so there's always that impassable gulf between the immediacy of the subjective experience of DMT and the kind of the verbal renderings and visual renderings that come out of it at the end, and people, it's impossible to bridge that gap
It's a tough one.
without going in there. Yeah,
Not a problem, definitely.
yeah, not a problem.
Let me read a little bit from Alien Information Theory to Jeffrey, well, both of you, and then Jeffrey, I'm really curious to see how you respond to that and how it meshes with some of your constructs and ideas.
Mhm.
So Andrew writes, our reality emerges from a code programmed by an alien hyperintelligence beyond the confines of our three-dimensional universe. For want of a better term, we will refer to this intelligence, the author of the code, as the other. DMT is a technology that gates access to the orthogonal dimensions of a reality beyond which this intelligence resides, and the necessary tool for resolution of the game. I'll explain in detail the nature of the game later in the book. Briefly, we have emerged within a lower dimensional digital structure, reversibly isolated from a higher dimensional system. Within this low dimensional reality, we will remain embedded until we learn to use this technology for permanent transcription and transference of our conscious intelligence into this higher dimensional container reality. This is the game, the 6 levels of which can be enumerated as follows: information, emergence, transmission, immersion, realization, resolution. So Andrew is proposing there's a telos kind of in human history that leads through science and art and academia and research and scholarship to this kind of direct experience of the other, and then ultimately potentially a transcendence or an immersion into that otherness. You know.
I think it's great. I love that. I love that book, Andrew. You write about that book in Death by Astonishment. I mean, you you suggest you're playing more, you're being more savvy in that book than perhaps this one. Can you say more about that? I mean, I have a lot to say about your project. I'll speak to Daniel's question or at a late eventually here, but I really do want to know about that other book and how it's related to this one. Is this one more on? I don't want to say honest. That's not the right word. It's more out there than.
Well, I mean, Alien Information Theory was my first book, and it
Yeah,
was very out there. I mean, people think that it's not my kind of worldview in a sense. It's not my own personal belief system. I don't think that I got everything right in Alien Information Theory at all.
yeah,
I described it in the introduction as like a textbook from the future.
yeah.
The idea
It is.
of um, I kind of riffed off again one of Terence McKenna's quotes when he said that it's like we're trapped inside a work of art in some
Yeah.
way. I really liked that. I don't know why, but it really kind of percussed me deep in my soul, this idea that we're trapped in this work of art, and that there's this vast intelligence that we're completely unaware of, and which we can gain access to by using this molecular technology, and the whole kind of, by incubating that idea, this book kind of emerged. I still am not quite sure where the book came from, to be honest. But it's just I think nobody really knows what the world is, or what reality is, or the extent of reality, or our relationship to broader reality, our little slice of reality that we live in. And the main thesis, I guess, of alien information theory is that we exist within this very limited lower dimensional slice of reality, and that DMT allows us to kind of, in a sense, unfold into broader reality and to experience things that are impossible from our perspective, our kind of very limited perspective. And I use this idea of kind of drawing from digital physics because I kind of liked that idea. DMT always has this very technological, digital kind of feel
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not the first person to connect the DMT experience to things like simulation theory and the idea that our reality is somehow computed or programmed.
Yeah.
But I wanted to kind of bring that together into a coherent, yes, teleological narrative. The idea that reality is a kind of game. I truly do believe that. I truly do believe that existence is a game. If not, then what's the point? I mean, it should be something that's kind of fun, and that we don't take too seriously. We need to take our what is it? G.K. Chesterton said that the angels fly because they take themselves lightly, and
Nice.
I kind of, I see reality as being a game, and I see somehow, and I can't explain exactly why, this strong sense that DMT is connected to that game.
Yeah.
I see DMT as being this message, this little Easter egg, if you like, implanted within our reality that we discover. Once you reach a certain level of cognitive sophistication, technological sophistication, then you discover DMT. Because DMT, of course, you can't just munch on plants and have a DMT trip, not like mushrooms. You have to actually isolate it and use it in a certain way. You have to either smoke the free, vaporize the freebase, or as we're doing now, inject it directly into the bloodstream. So it feels like this, in a sense, like an intelligence test that's just sitting there, this message that permeates all of reality, and it permeates certainly all of the plant kingdom. It's found in countless plants. Nature is drenched in DMT, as Dennis McKenna likes to say, and it's found in humans as well. It's like it's waiting there for us to kind of find it, and once we do, then we start to think, oh, we've kind of found the keys to the other. We've found the keys to this realm that we could not have suspected existed. I mean, that's incredible. That there's this
And you
other
kind of, and you kind
world.
of, you, and you
Mm.
kind of turned that into a testable hypothesis with the extended state DMT sessions. And I'm kind of curious, kind of like, okay, so now that you've had those going on for a number of years, that people have been able to go into the space immersively for like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. What's coming back as data that either supports or challenges or changes the hypothesis? I mean, I know Anton, our mutual friend, was
Yeah.
fascinated with this idea that we could actually gain knowledge if we could maintain ourselves in this other world. Like it would tell us like how to make a free energy drive, or how to grow food on the moon or something. But that doesn't, from what I can see, that doesn't seem to be happening at this point. There isn't any kind of like tangible information exchange. So
Well,
now that you've had
mm.
this sort of testable hypothesis for a while, where is that taking you now?
Well, I think it's very human centric to think that we're going to get the blueprints for the time machine from these beings. I think I'm not sure what the agenda is. I don't know whether they'd be particularly interested in supplying us, or whether it'd even be a good idea to supply humans with the blueprints for the time machine. I don't think we're even remotely close to being ready for such a technology. And so I think the idea that we must only take these beings seriously if they give us very human technologies, right? That's kind of what we assume we're going to get from them. And I don't think that we can make that assumption at all. I think I was speaking to Dennis McKenna just a few weeks ago, and he asked the same question, and we kind of batted it back and forth a bit. And I think in the end, we came to the conclusion that the most important message for humanity to accept, first of all, is that we don't know shit about reality. And I think that's the key message that you get from DMT, in my opinion, the one that we need to take to heart, and that's probably the most difficult for humans to accept, is that we don't know shit about the nature of reality and our relationship to humanity. To our relationship to broader reality. And so I think, in terms of DMTX, what are we getting? What will we get? I think it's very early stages. I mean, so the studies at Imperial College that you described was more like a pilot study for testing safety and efficacy, basically. Is it safe? Is it tolerable? Can people handle being in the space for 30 minutes or longer? Are there no kind of adverse physiological changes or anything like that? That was the only aim there. So any trip reports that came out of that were a bonus. So there haven't been any, the aim, in my opinion, of DMTX is to allow people with certain specialities, whether it's mathematicians or topologists or theologians or anthropologists or linguists, to go into the space, to gather certain types of information, to analyze and explore the space, to establish communication with the intelligences within the space. We go in there with a very much an open mind, and with humility, hopefully, with the understanding that actually we are the neophytes entering this realm, and the intelligences that we're entering into a communion with are far more advanced than us, and know far more about what's going on in the big sense than we do. And so I don't know what that is going to garner, what kind of information we're likely to get. I think we have to go there and enter into communication first of all. And now we have the technology, and it has been shown to be safe and to be tolerable and to be extendable beyond. In Basel, Matthias
Talking about
did
sending people in there for like 8 hours or days. Then you have to like have like a ready with nutritional supplements. They can keep flying around.
Well, that's what I talk about that, a lot. I mean, a lot of that's a little bit hyperbolic, I think, at this point. That gets attention, right? When you talk about having feeding tubes and waste management systems, but it's possible. But
I want to
I'm
go
not
back
sure we're
to
ready for it.
Jeffrey. So, Jeffrey, what do you think about sort of Andrew's kind of thesis that DMT, which we had to get to a certain level of scientific and cognitive sophistication to extract and refine, and then that actually leads out to this hyperdimensional realm, that it could imply there is kind of like a telos in human history and human evolution, that is actually a different kind of purpose orientation than we're seeing in kind of like the singularity or the transhumanist idea. I would say that it's like an orthogonal kind of shift into this understanding of the realm of consciousness as kind of the ultimate realm of exploration and sacred and so on, and then actually, not trying to navigate and dive deeper, into that realm.
Well, I have so much to say. First of all, I love what Andrew's doing. I totally am like, go do it, let's do it. Come on. What I would say is that this notion of ontological shock or death by astonishment. I think human beings have been having this experience for as far as we can see back, and I think this is what the history of religions is. It's a series of ontological shocks or death by astonishment. It's one worldview replacing another worldview, replacing another worldview. And I think the reason that scientists in particular have such a hard time with these revelations is that they exist in a materialist or physicalist paradigm. which I just think is half true, but half wrong. And I think what shocks them is this when they're propelled into this hyperdimensional world, they it isn't scientific. It doesn't merge or it doesn't mesh with their materialist science, and so they're shocked. Um, I don't think our personally, I don't think a lot of our ancestors, I don't think a lot of us are shocked because we see these revelations throughout human history, and this notion of not knowing shit. I completely agree, but there's an entire religious literature called mystical or apophatic mystical literature that is about that very thing. It's about how we don't know shit. And it goes after things like our notions of God and our notions of the soul and our notions of the human. And it's based, what I really want to say here is it's based on human experience. There's an empiricism, there's an experiential dimension to this that is really dramatic, but we just don't look at it anymore. We don't, because these are weird religious people and we just dismiss them and we make fun of them, or we say they're nuts, or we say they're hallucinating, or whatever lame excuse we give. And I just think we have to listen more closely to our own histories, but we also have to do the science. We also have to do the DMT stuff. I think the DMT, the psychedelic research agenda is wonderful, and it's fundamentally different than what our ancestors did, but our ancestors know a lot. And the literature and the histories know a lot. And we really need to listen to them. Let me give you an example that'll feed into Andrew's.
Mhm.
Um, so when Antone and David, Luke and Rory Spowers and these people invited me to England, what they asked me to do was bring Whitley Strieber. And I spoke to Whitley. I was like, Whitley, they want you to come and they want to do X, Y, and Z. And like, well, and he said to me, he said, which I
Maybe,
told,
maybe just for people who don't know, Whitley Strieber has written a lot about alien abductions, the gray aliens, also kind of like the supernatural, and he certainly claims to have had an incredible range of
but again, I don't,
experience.
again, Daniel, I don't think those were claims.
Yeah.
I just think those are honest descriptions of what actually happened to him. And this is the traditional scientific dismissal of these experiences, is that they're claims or that they're hallucinations or whatever. I just think that's crazy. That's nonsense. Let's just get over that. But Whitley says to me, he says, well, I've never taken a psychedelic in my life. And I'm like, I know, I told him that. And so, but what the researchers, including Dennis, really thought was that Whitley, it's endogenous DMT release. It's something that's happening in his body, and it's creating these states, and he's creating these hyperdimensional, or it's giving access to these hyperdimensional worlds. I think that's basically correct, Andrew. I think that reading of the history of religions is basically on the right track, that there's something in the body of human beings, there's something in the plant world that gives access to these hyperdimensionalities. But there's an empiricism there. That's what I want to say. There's an experiential root to this. And I think as long as we keep those two things together, we can move this thing forward. And to answer Daniel's question, I do think there's an impulse. There's an evolutionary impulse. There's a meaning to all of this, but I don't think we know what it is. But again, our ancestors had lots of different answers to that question, and I think they're worth listening to. But meaning and a kind of teleological causality is just heresy in a scientific worldview. You can't talk about an endpoint or teleological causality. That's just not right. So that's what I mean when I say they're impossible. They're not impossible, but they're impossible in a particular worldview. And what I love about what Andrew's doing is that he's challenging that worldview through human experience and through the science itself. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, and I had lots of conversations with Dennis around the soul, by the way, and the UFO. And I do think there's a connection between the abduction experience or the close encounters experience and the DMT experience. There obviously is. But we don't know what that connection is yet because we haven't taken those two sets of experiences seriously on their own, much less together.
Andrew, have you ever tried dipropyltryptamine, DPT?
No, I haven't, I'm
Ah,
afraid.
give that one a whirl. Okay, so let's see. So many thoughts. Um, yeah, because there could be many of these hyperdimensional realities. We don't know that DMT is the only, game in town out there, right? Like, or I mean,
No.
yeah,
But Daniel,
It-
what I'm trying to say is all you got to do is read the history of religions, read comparative religion. It's filled with weird alternative realities.
yeah.
They're always coded. Yes, they're culturally coded and conditioned by the local context, but we need ways of balancing that cultural context and that transcendent world, and we don't have them. We just don't
Well,
have them because
we
we
do have
deny that that world
we have
exists.
we have some. I mean, for instance, I keep now as you were talking, I was thinking a lot about Saint Terence McKenna, our
Yeah,
modern psychedelic, one of our modern psychedelic saints, right? Like,
right.
but I think that if McKenna had been predicting 2027 as the end of time wave zero,
Mm.
everybody would be like, oh, like that makes sense, because we're seeing artificial superintelligence, artificial general intelligence, and we're also seeing, yeah, it feels like, human civilization is going through, a flip with Trump and autocracy, and kind of like it sort of feels right now that somehow or other the dam has broken, whether it's with Gaza or whether it's like, the sort of open manipulation through AI and kind of where that could tend. I mean, when you think about where we could go from here, it gets very, very freaky, right? Like, let's say 3 years from now, whoever follows Trump, if they have this control of the information ecology of the U.S., they could take over the New York Times. They'd be like, oh, just we'll rewrite digital archive of the New York Times using AI. So back in 1944, Hitler won the war, but he was a great guy, and this happened and that happened. It's like our whole relationship to history, truth, is kind of more and more up for grabs, by this sort of mechanism that's happened. At the same time, we're having this confrontation with the other that kind of merges the sort of kind of like trends in religion, trends in scientific empiricism, trends in romanticism, and is allowing these like more and more direct and mediated contacts with the kind of hyperintelligence. Yeah, I don't know, Andrew. How does that all sit with you? Do you have a sense that we're maybe this is all kind of like a timed kind of evolutionary kind of like fetal development and birthing process and the level of like species consciousness? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it certainly feels like that. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I mean, you're right. If Terence had nudged the time wave just a few years, I think people would be seeing. I mean, he said that things are going to get weirder and weirder and weirder to the point where people can't keep quiet about it anymore, and people are going to start talking about how weird it's getting. Um, and does that suggest that we're approaching some kind of phase transition? Um, um, does that mean that we're about to um, transcend the material form in some way? I mean, people are already speculating on the possibility that I think it was Susan Schneider and Stephen Dick, who are these post astrobiologist types, and they were decades ago now were speculating on what does it look like for a civilization when they the kind of the trajectory of an intelligent civilization. And once they kind of reach the stage where they begin to contemplate the cosmos and begin to kind of they enter into this highly technologically sophisticated age, they posited that probably by that point, the civilization is maybe a couple of 100 years away from, or I mean, that's obviously a very rough, loose guess, but basically on the edge. By the time we reach the kind of stage we're in now, in other words, we're already on the edge, right? We're already at that that exponential curve is already kind of moving upwards, and suggesting that we are at the end of history in a sense, and that where all things come together, and we find ourselves facing the possibility of no longer existing as humans, and what does that look like? And people have speculated on that for a long time. Is what do we mean when we say an intelligence that has transcended the material form? I mean, Terence McKenna used to talk about us sloughing off the body and entering into the imagination and stuff like this, lovely kind of language. But what does it actually mean for an intelligence to transcend? Does it mean, I think in people's heads, I imagine they see kind of stacks of servers on the nearest moon, kind of running a civilization or something, and we're going to sort of upload ourselves into that. But I don't think it's going to be like that at all. I think it's more likely to be a civilization that somehow finds perhaps a way to instantiate themselves at the deepest ground of reality. If computation is kind of the thing, is the game in town, and it seems to be, right? Artificial intelligence now, this is all about computation. It's all about manipulating some kind of computational substrate to generate intelligence. And one can imagine us kind of either not just interfacing with that kind of intelligence, but instantiating ourselves with an intelligence that is not running on systems of transistors and in kind of stacks of servers in some warehouse or something, but has found a way to manipulate the basic fundamental structure of space-time. We kind of merge with reality. And I think DMT gives us a kind of hint of that. It's like we get a glimpse of what it looks like to transcend. It almost feels to me as if we've kind of popped out into this lower dimensional realm kind of temporarily. It feels like we're kind of on vacation here, and that actually we're always been, from the moment we emerged within this little
It's hard.
bubble.
It's more. It's work on that other realm, and this is a vacation. That's a little
Yeah,
different.
this is the vacation, right? And I think that this
This is hard
universe,
work,
this
Andrew. Come on.
bubble, it is, yeah, okay. But that's kind of part of the fun of it, I guess, because it's going to be all right in the end when we merge back, and we kind of pop back into or unfold, as I said earlier, kind of unfold back or merge through some kind of computational means or whatever that's going to look like. I don't know. We kind of merge back into that expansive structure, and that's not so far away from many religious traditions. It's not so far from what you'd find in Hinduism or something like this, the
End of
idea of
days.
the cyclical nature and the idea of Brahman kind of playing this game of Leela, and that it's all cyclical, and that we're kind of in the I guess the Kali Yuga now, we would say, right? When it is getting crazy and wild, and it's all about destruction, and the whole thing seems to be falling apart, and it all is incinerated in fire, in great, that kind of thing. And I don't think that's necessarily literal. But that's kind of what's happening now. Things are getting crazy, things are getting chaotic, and it feels like we're on the edge, perhaps, of merging back into pralaya or whatever it is, right? Into that original source state. And DMT gives us a glimpse of what that looks like, or might actually be the conduit by which we achieve that. How those things come together, I don't know, but I can't get over the feeling that they do. Yeah, I'm rambling a little bit, but
No, no, it's
I
good.
kind
It's
of,
a good riff. It's a good riff.
yeah.
What about you, Jeffrey? I mean, I noted in the book I quoted at the beginning, you were talking a little bit about, and I've thought about this a lot too. Kind of like, yeah, we're embedded still in this kind of Newtonian Cartesian space-time. So we have a construct of this sort of linear time and this sort of material solidity of the material realm, and therefore we have this idea of history as a linear progression. But that's not the only way that humans have experienced time.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Gene Gebser, who wrote that book, The Ever-Present Origin. And he talks about, different structures of consciousness that have different ways of kind of relating to time and space. And so, like, older cultures were mythological, myth-based, and they had a sort of cyclical model of time, as Andrew mentioned, with the Yuga cycle, or the Aztecs or the Mayans with the long count cycles, and so on. So yeah, do you think that we might literally be at the end of history as our artificial intelligence that we've constructed is even potentially consuming the sort of consensus reality that until now we've shared, and that could be kind of almost like indication of like the end of one phase and the kind of inception of something that is very hard to qualify or understand from where we are now. You know?
I mean, again, so we call those eschatologies
Yeah.
in the study of religion. And one of the things that you kind of learn early on is that there's been lots of eschatologies. The world's been ending a long time. History's been ending for a long time. And of course it does end. And then it doesn't. And it regenerates itself. And also a real big part of religion is the study of shamanism. And um, Andrew, he brought up Davi Kopanawa and the Yanomami in Latin America, and the person who founded my own discipline wrote a big book on shamanism. Mircea Eliade, and so this has been in the. What I'm trying to say is this has been in the bloodstream of Western intellectual history for a long time. And it's no accident that when John Mack started to take experiencers seriously with the abduction phenomenon, he went to shamans. He went almost immediately to shamans. And so he saw that there was this connection between this history of religions, or this deeper human history, and what was happening in his abduction experiencers. We don't know what that connection is. I'm not reducing things to shamanism. I don't want to go back to Hinduism, or the Mayan. I want us to sort of move forward and think about these things, but also take very seriously these Mayan and these Hindu and these shamanistic worldviews, because they no doubt have a great deal to teach us, and we don't know what that is because we haven't really listened to them as a public. I know Andrew has, I know you have, Daniel. I know there are places in our culture where these things are taken very seriously, but I doubt we have really integrated those into our modern worldview. So that's really what I have to say, and I think the DMT is really powerful because it's a molecule, for gosh sakes, and it looks like a technology, as Andrew points out, that is used to propel people into these other worlds in a fairly consistent and fairly reliable way, and we just don't have that, in our banal secular lives. We're just kind of stuck in this simulation that we're in.
Andrew, what were some of the most interesting from the extended state experiences? What were some of the experiences that you had or other people had where you were like,
Can
"Holy
I,
cow!" Huh?
Daniel, can I say one more thing?
Yeah,
I,
of
I mean,
course.
I know I've said this before, but I'll say it to Andrew. The whole history, of course, of Western intellectual life begins with the simulation theory. It literally begins with it. I mean, Plato's cave
Plato.
is a simulation theory, for goodness sake. And that's where we get the word academy from. The academy was this grove outside of Athens, and the whole Platonic worldview is all about simulation and don't trust the senses. They
Mm.
can tell you something, sure, but they're shadows on the cave wall. They're not the sun outside. And I think this is kind of what you're trying to say as well in Death by Astonishment. But it's an ancient an an ancient message, and I don't mean that negatively. I mean that it's certainly what we need to listen to, but are we really listening to it as a public? I don't know. I don't see that right now. And the AI thing, oh my God, it's just more materialist bullshit, frankly. It's the idea that we're going to get consciousness from little bits of matter. And
Mm.
I mean, come on. We've been there before. That didn't work. So can we not recognize that there's an intelligence behind artificial intelligence called us, and we don't know what us is? We really don't know what the human is. We don't know how far it extends or how cosmic it really is. So, can't we recognize our own cosmic nature, our own integrity, and not keep projecting it onto something? In this case, it's always AI. In another case, it was a god, or it was a demon, or it was an angel, or whatever. Like, stop it. Just stop the projection. Own the human divinity, as it were, and break those models down. That's really what I'm trying to say.
How does that strike you, Andrew?
Well, I've always been a very, I mean, I get a lot of stick for my comments on AI, but personally, I mean, I'm not an AI expert, and I guess that's kind of the problem. But I'm bored. I'm bored of it already. Um, I don't find it impressive, and I don't find it. I don't see that it's take. I don't see where it's taking us. Um, um, I think that if transcendence is going to come, it's going to come. It's
Yeah.
going to be approached directly. It's not going to come by uploading our brain, however that's going to work. People talk about uploading our consciousness, into a computer or into an art. But what does that even mean? I mean, that doesn't even mean anything. It's like incompatible. It's like apples and oranges. The idea that what do you mean uploading consciousness? So or the idea that if you upload all of the information contained in the brain that you're going to replicate. None of it makes any sense to me, and I don't think anyone makes sense to anyone else. It's just a nice, fun idea.
Well, Andrew, it makes a lot of sense to a materialist or a
Mm,
physicalist who thinks that consciousness is a function of brain matter. It makes total sense. But I just think that's a mistaken or
mm.
wrong philosophical position. And therefore, all of this stuff about creating consciousness through more and more data is just nonsense. It's just wrong. It can mimic consciousness, but it can't be conscious.
I agree. Yeah. As I said, I think that whatever transcension looks like, it's going to be approached through consciousness directly. It's something you face. I mean, when you take DMT, it's something you confront this transcendent space directly.
Yeah.
You don't do it via a computer, or you don't do it via something
You
else.
you
No
become it.
middleman.
You become
You
it.
become it.
You are it. And that's what I was trying to
Yeah.
say is, can't we own that becoming? Can't we be that? Why do we have to keep projecting that onto some machine?
Yeah, I agree.
Um, well, I mean, I'd asked you a little bit about, kind of what you took as most extraordinary experiences. But then I had another question actually, which is kind of
Mm.
like, I often wonder about, because when you take DMT, you're in this other reality, but does anybody have the experience of actually having a sense of their own body in that space, or you're just kind of like this sort of pinpoint of awareness, kind of like yeah, it's not like you have a body that you can, like a subtle body that you can move around with or something like that. It's really that you are just kind of like this pinpoint of awareness in this other reality,
Yeah, I mean that seems to be certainly my experience. And if you harvest trip reports, there's almost never a mention of a body. It seems to be you become literally a point, a perspective. I mean, that's all consciousness is really. I mean, there are many, the million masks of God, as again Chesterton. Uh, the idea that each of us is just one perspective. That's all consciousness is, and the body itself is in consciousness, or is part of consciousness, or is. I think the brain itself is. I mean, in a sense, I'm an idealist. I mean, I don't sound like it very often, but
Yeah.
I don't think that there's like consciousness and then there's the brain, or that the consciousness is being received by the brain. I think that the brain is a complex pattern of consciousness, and there is nothing else. But consciousness has structure, and it does things, brains emerge as this very highly complex pattern of consciousness, and that's really the idea in alien information theory. The first book, I framed it in terms of information, but really I was talking about consciousness, to be honest.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was talking about the way that consciousness complexifies and forms these perspectives, and that's an idealist position. So I forget what that was related to the question, was it?
Yeah.
It's,
I was asking about how, I mean, I think often about how with DMT or these other, you
yeah,
don't have a subtle body. You're not like able to move
right.
around, and there's nothing to look down upon. You're just this kind of like
Yeah.
pin of awareness in this like hyperdimensional space or something.
Yeah, I think so. You don't really, you don't need, I mean, the body that we experience is very much
But then
plugged into
you
this
encounter
reality.
these other kind of beings who do seem to have like structured bodies, or they do seem to be moving in the space in some hyperdimensional way, you know.
Yeah, I don't think when you see let's say, a mantid alien, I don't think that these beings actually have the form necessarily of an embodied
Well,
earthly creature. And that
yeah,
doesn't kind of make any sense to me that they would actually be insects like beings. I think, but they clearly use form. I mean, the shamans knew this. I mean,
Yeah.
when Mac spoke to this guy, what's his name, Bernardo Peixoto, he said, no, they use form,
yeah.
because that's what makes sense to us. But they don't have a form. They're not in any place. They're kind of everywhere and nowhere. But they use form because, that's what makes sense to us as humans. We can only understand the presence of a being if it takes on some kind of form.
So can I speak to that, Daniel? I mean, first of all, I love your idealism, Andrew. I mean, that's a theory of the imagination, though, right there. In the sense that they take on form, but they're not form. The mantis is there, but it's not a mantis.
Mm.
Okay. And a few years ago, I invited a bunch of people to Esalen, and I asked them two things. I said, come with your most extraordinary experience and come with a theory of the imagination that can make that possible. Everybody came with some drop your jaw experience. Nobody came with a theory of the imagination.
Mm.
Nobody.
Mm.
We do not have that sophistication because we imagine that the imagination is imaginary. It's shit. It's schlock. But what if reality is manifesting itself to human beings through the imagination?
What is the imagination, Jeffrey?
Yeah. Well, this is where
Best question. Yeah.
I love your idealism. I mean, I think the imagination is just a function of consciousness of this mind, that needs images and needs stories for whatever reason. I don't claim to understand why. But the other thing I want to say is most of the planet, by the way, embodies some kind of reincarnation theory. And that model assumes we're not our body. It assumes that we take on different bodies. And pretty much all of modern critical theory in the academy assumes a one life model, that we are our bodies, that our identities are our identity, are our physical identities. And I just think that's a half truth. Yeah, that's true. That we need to struggle with that, but we also need to take in this broader humanity that saw reincarnation. And by reincarnation, they didn't mean a balloon hopping from one human life to another. They meant you're a plant, you're an animal, you're a god, you're a daimon, you're a deva, whatever. They meant it like cosmically, often. And I think that's we need to really consider those models
And
because
there's
they're
that great work by what's his name? The guy who wrote Where Biology and Reincarnation Intersect.
yeah, yeah,
You
Ian
know,
Stevenson.
you know that work, Andrew? Ian Stevenson? He's a
Mm.
professor at University of Virginia. He went all around the world tracking children who had spontaneous past life recall in early childhood.
Yeah,
And a lot of them happened in cultures where they have an understanding or not or an idea of reincarnation. But he would be able to go and he'd find these kids. They'd be like, 6, 7, 8, and one day the kid would wake up and he'd be like, "Wait a second, I live in Agra. I have a family. I've got a wife. I've got 2 kids. What's going on here?" And he would, in some cases, be able to take the kids to the place where they said they were from,
Mm.
find the family, and they'd find that the person that he thought he was had died in a car crash or something 2 years before the kid was born, and then the kid might have like some kind of significant birthmark on his chest, and it would turn out the guy had gotten killed from a wound to the chest or something. So
well,
there's like photos in the book of like autopsies and these kids
and
showing these
and
relationships.
and Daniel, what I love about Andrew's work, so David Hufford is a colleague of mine in folklore stories. Where people go with that story you just told is a cultural source hypothesis. They say, oh, that's Indian culture reproducing itself. But David's like, well, what if it's an experience source hypothesis? What if it's an actual experience and you find those same stories in cultures that do not have a reincarnation model? And what I love about the DMT stuff is you can put it in anybody's body. You can vape it or put it in a bloodstream on any human being, and you're going to get a similar kind of experience. You do not need to rely on Latin America shamanism or whatever, you know. So there's a kind of universalism or species-wide point to what the science is doing and what the psychedelic research is doing that you do not find in a cultural context because you can always reduce it to the culture or to the historical context.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, um, although you do have scientific, rational-minded people who take DMT and interpret it through that grid. In fact, Andrew, in a way, was a little bit unusual that even though he had a scientific materialist framing, he had this sort of ontological shock where he was like, "Oh, like this is more." I mean, even like Andrew, our friend Andres Emilson, who I think has been doing some of the most fascinating work on DMT with the Qualia Foundation, I think that he still kind of holds a kind of more capacious, kind of like scientific materialist understanding of how these sort of the way the molecules kind of interact with your synapses and so on, then leads you to have this direct perception of a certain form of geometry, hyperdimensional, and that gives you certain different perception of like time and space and consciousness, but he still sort of sees it enfolded within a materialist worldview in a way.
Yeah, I mean, like the hyperbolic geometry stuff, and
Hyperbolic,
I think
exactly.
he's kind of open. He doesn't dismiss the idea. He does see. I mean, he's very mathematically sophisticated, and so when he sees when he goes into the DMT space and sees something that's impossible, he can tell you why it's impossible. He can tell you why this elf that was painting a surface with four colors, why that's actually very difficult to do for a human brain, right? Solving the four color theorem, basically. And so I think that, whereas I would just go, wow, that's fucking awesome. That's
Yeah.
incredible. Whereas he can say, no, it's not just awesome. It's actually incredibly sophisticated mathematical operation that these beings are performing. So that going back to DMTX, I do see a role for those kind of people who
Yeah.
go in there. So I think he does admit that his models do that's those kind of experiences where he sees beings that are performing these tasks that a human brain couldn't do. He that makes him question whether he's actually dealing with some kind of intelligence that is,
Yeah.
some other conscious being, some other perspective of consciousness. If you define a conscious being like that, I don't think of aliens. Like the alien's a lovely word, but I think ultimately the shamanistic peoples who are talking about, spirits of the forest or whatever, or they rarely use the word spirit, but this other that we call spirits, and me and modern Westerners talking about entities or alien intelligence. I think we're all talking about the same
Yeah.
thing. We all come from different cultural backgrounds and different world views and different perspectives. But I think ultimately there's no difference. An alien abduction encounter is an encounter with some kind of other intelligence that's probably not physical in any way as we would normally understand it. And the shamans are interacting with intelligences. And when you smoke DMT in the 21st century, you're interacting with some kind of intelligences. And I think if we were able to see from kind of this bird's eye view, if you like, we would see actually that we're all describing the same thing, which is this age-old experience that goes back tens of millennia of humans interacting with other, right? Some kind
That's
of intelligence. And that
that
goes
that's
back,
it.
and that's it, right?
That's it. That's right. That's right. It. That's it. Folks,
What about,
Daniel, I'm sorry. I have to go. I have
yeah, I
another
know,
meeting.
definitely. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I do not want to go, trust me.
Let's
But
let's do this again.
yeah,
Um,
no, let's definitely do it
For
again.
sure.
But
uh,
Andrew, that's it. You just You got it. I mean,
Ah,
to me, that's
fantastic.
like, oh my God, that's so good. But we don't have that kind of comparative bird's eye view.
Mm.
We have these local, cultural, contextual, or materialist viewpoints, and I want us to like push towards that, and I don't think that's in our ancestors. I don't think that's in our histories, by the way, but I do think it's in the modern scientific research. That's kind of, I'm just summing it up.
So I think that we
Perfect.
let's stop for today, Andrew, Jeffrey. I know you got to
Mhm.
go, but let's pick this up again in a couple of weeks. I think now we have a good ground. We're getting to know each other, and I think we could have an even
Yeah. No,
dive.
let's definitely do it. And I'm
All right,
so
cool.
sorry. I'm so sorry. I
Well, no,
just
it's great. It's good to have a little bit of an interruption, and then like
yeah.
we'll be able to like marinate on this or watch the video and come back with even more refined perspective. So I'm
Yeah.
really
Okay.
excited. I think this is a very good kind of trialogue opportunity here.
Okay. All right.
Perfect.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thanks,
day.
Jeffrey. Thanks, Daniel.
Bye.
Bye bye.